Hi ladies, this is a presentation on transpiration and transport in plants. So let's first look at some adaptations for preventing water loss. So transpiration, as we're going to talk about in a couple minutes, is the evaporation of water from the leaves of a plant. So plants have been doing a lot of things over many, many years to prevent water loss, because remember that water is one of the key ingredients in photosynthesis. In order to make sugars, carbon dioxide needs to enter in the leaves through stomata, combine with water, and sugars can be created. Oxygen will be given off as a byproduct. We're going to talk about photosynthesis a little bit more in the future, but for right now, carbon dioxide comes in with water at the leaf, makes sugar, gets rid of oxygen. So it's really important for water to be able to be transported from the roots of a plant up to the leaves of a plant. Initially, plants had to be on the surface of the ground because they couldn't transport water. But eventually, long-distance transport was possible through vascular structures such as the xylem and phloem. These are basically like tubes that can help pull water up a plant and allow it to go higher up in the plant, not just off the surface of the ground. So moss, for example, don't actually have these vascular structures, but ferns, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. Gymnosperms being like cone-bearing plants, angiosperms being flower plants, so like trees and most plants you see outside are actually angiosperms. These plants have the xylem and the phloem to help transport water. So the xylem is for transporting water from the roots to the shoots, minerals dissolved in the water too, and the phloem will actually transport sugar from the sources in the leaves where it's made through photosynthesis down to sinks where it can be stored. So having the ability to transport water a long distance is really great because plants can grow off the floor and they can get more sunlight. And because they can get more sunlight, they can, of course, make more sugar. Having a waxy cuticle, also a great evolutionary advantage. That waxy cuticle, just basically like a waxy film on the outside of a leaf, keeps all the moisture inside the leaf, which is really great. And then regulating the stomata. Remember, stomata are little pores that are found inside a leaf. We're going to look at stomata a little bit more. And these pores will actually let carbon dioxide and oxygen go in and out, but they'll also let water go out as well. And we're going to talk about how plants are able to regulate the stomata so they don't lose too much water. So let's first talk about what transpiration is. Transpiration is the evaporation of water from a plant's stomata. So evaporation at the plant's leaf. And this is going to happen through those little holes, the stomata, which typically are on the underside of a plant's leaf, if we're talking about a terrestrial plant. Now let's talk about what this does. So water is going to move from roots to the leaves because of a couple of different things. Number one, as the water is evaporating, so transpiration, just because they get a lot of sunlight, it's going to get warm, the water is going to evaporate. So as the water is evaporating, it's going to create these little open spaces. So as the water goes from liquid water to water vapor, there's going to be these little open spaces that are created. And these open spaces are basically allowing more water to come and fill them. So this basically lowers the water potential of the leaves. Because the water potential of the leaves is so low, water can move from further down in the plant up to the low water potential area in the leaves. Water will also move from areas of high water potential to low water potential because of cohesion. So remember that water molecules are attracted to each other. So they almost form this little tug-of-war line. So as a water molecule evaporates, the next one is going to be pulled into its place. And this is going to allow water to be pulled all the way from the roots to the leaves. Let's look at a picture of this. Remember that water potential means that, how water potential gradients work. Water will always move from areas of high water potential to areas of low water potential. So note down here that the soil has a higher water potential than the air outside, than the leaf, than this area of the leaf and surrounded by the cell walls, then the trunk, then the lower trunk. Okay, so it's just relative. Okay, lower water potential, higher water potential. So if we look at this zoomed up, okay, here's the stomata, little pore on the bottom of a leaf typically. Water is going to evaporate, okay, moving from areas of high water potential to areas of low water potential. Okay, very low water potential in the air, a little bit higher in the leaf. As those water molecules evaporate, they're going to make little spaces. And these spaces will allow more water molecules to be kind of pulled up. And remember that cohesion occurs because of the hydrogen bonding between two different water molecules. So these molecules are kind of linked to each other. And if one gets pulled, the other one gets pulled. Okay, and this is going to happen all the way down into the roots where the water is actually absorbed into the xylem. Okay, water is going to be moving from where it has a high water potential to where it has a low water potential. Cohesion is going to help pull it. Okay, let's look at how the rate of transpiration is regulated by stomata. So remember those little pores in the bottom of the leaf. So generally, leaves will have this very broad surface. So the typical leaf has a very broad surface with a high surface area to volume ratio, which is great for photosynthesis. Okay, lots of photosynthesis happening, lots of cells exposed to sunlight. But that also means that there's an increased water loss through the stomata because there's going to be, if the photosynthesis is happening at an increased rate, okay, water loss is also going to be happening because the stomata need to be open to exchange those gases. So guard cells are able to help balance this water conservation, okay, with the gas exchange needed for photosynthesis. So we're going to look at a picture of this in a second. You're going to see changes in turgor pressure, okay, that will open and close the stomata. Remember that the turgor pressure is just the pressure potential of the cell. So when a cell is turgid, the guard cells are going to be bowed outward and the pore is going to be really wide open. When the cell is flaccid, the guard cells will be less bowed and the pore will be closed. Let's look at what this looks like. Okay, so here's an open pore for the stomata. Okay, the stomata is just that little open space. And you can see here that these guard cells are very turgid, okay, and the stomata is opened. Here, the guard cells are flaccid, which will close the stomata. The reason this happens is because of potassium ions. So in order to make the cell, these cells turgid, the cell will actually will actively transport potassium ions, okay, using a pump. Okay, we talked about this. So using a pump, it'll actively transport potassium ions into the cell. And this will cause water to flow in after. Remember that osmosis occurs, okay, where the water is always going to flow to where there's more solute. Okay, thinking about this, you could also think it with water potential. There's a lower water potential here, higher water potential here whenever you pump all those potassium ions in. Okay, the opposite is true here. Whenever the cell stops pumping these potassium ions, okay, the water will then flow out, okay, and these cells will become flaccid again. ABA, biscus acid, is also helped to regulate this water loss. Okay, it'll actually it's produced in response to water deficiency and causes the closing of the stomata. So that's another thing that happens. Some plants have a very specific way that they open and close their stomata. So CAM photosynthesis, okay, is a specific type. And this is when the plants will actually only open their stomata at night for gas exchange. This typically occurs in plants that live in very, very hot and dry climates. So when you think about a lot of cactuses, a lot of succulents, places in the desert where it's really, really dry and hot during the day, but at night it's a little bit cooler. So not as much water loss will occur and the gases can be exchanged at night, and then during the day photosynthesis can take place. I just wanted to bring this up on the topic of, since we've been talking about transpiration, plants will also need to take in different dissolved minerals and nutrients in order to go through its metabolism. Bacteria are needed in order to, nitrogen-fixing bacteria are really important for actually allowing the absorption of nitrogen. Most of the nitrogen in our environment is actually nitrogen gas, which most organisms can't absorb. But these nitrogen-fixing bacteria allow plants to absorb this nitrate or ammonia, and as a result, they can incorporate it into their DNA and their proteins, and it is then transferred from plants to animals when animals consume those plants. Last thing I want to talk about is sugar transport. So sugar is transported from a source to a sink, as I said before, in the phloem. And this is called translocation. So basically, the process transports products of photosynthesis, which is mostly sugars like sucrose, through the phloem from a sugar source in the leaf to a sugar sink. And this is going to happen through co-transporters. Co-transporters are going to allow sucrose to be pumped. So you have a proton pump that's going to pump these protons against their concentration gradient. This is active transport. And then a co-transporter will use the movement of a proton through to help transport sucrose through a membrane protein as well. I'm going to show you why this is so important that this happens. So if you look here, this tube right here is the xylem. This tube would be the phloem. In most plants will have several xylems and several phloems. Okay, they usually don't just have one tube of each. But the phloem is going to require loading. Okay, it's going to require that active transport through co-transporters. So pumping those protons, okay, and then co-transporting the proton with the sucrose through. Okay, takes a lot of energy to do this, but the plant is basically going to load up sucrose into the phloem. So getting all this sucrose into the phloem is going to take a lot of energy. It's also going to build up the concentration of sucrose here. This buildup of the sucrose here is going to actually cause water to flow. So this would have a negative or much lower water potential. And remember that water is going to flow from where it has a high water potential to where it has a low water potential. Okay, where there's flow from where water is highly concentrated to where it's less concentrated. So then once the sucrose and the water are in here, that flow of water and that increased flow of sucrose is going to create this positive pressure that basically forces the sucrose and the water down to the sinks. Okay, so the increased pumping of sucrose, the increased movement of water to follow the sucrose, that's going to just push all of the sucrose solution down to the sinks where it can be stored for later. The water will then be recycled. So it's going to flow, it's going to be basically pulled back into the xylem, and evaporation from the stomata is going to pull that up through the use of negative water potential, or negative water potential. So it's going to be more negative at the leaf, okay, less negative down closer to the surface of the plant, or closer to the ground by the plant. And yeah, so that's how water and sugar are transported in plants. We are going to practice and review transpiration in class, so please bring any questions you have with you. Have a nice day, ladies.